Ukraine and the country's Western partners must now find the right balance between addressing the risk of a major new escalation and preventing Putin from using saber-rattling tactics in order to gain the upper hand in negotiations. While it is impossible to predict the likelihood of a full-scale invasion, Ukraine must militarily prepare for such an eventuality. It is also crucial to coordinate a united response to Russian threats from Ukraine, the US, and Europe. This is particularly important following the recent conference call between Putin, Macron, and Merkel, which sidelined Ukraine and created a dangerous precedent. The current tensions are a signal for the United States to assess its own involvement in the Ukraine peace process. The new Biden administration may wish to consider a more prominent role rather than continuing to delegate this important transatlantic security issue to Germany and France. It is vital to conduct any discussions on possible greater U.S. participation in peace talks before Chancellor Merkel leaves office later this year. Brian Whitmore, Nonresident Senior Fellow, Atlantic Council. The Russian military build-up near the Ukrainian border is not happening in isolation. It is part of a broader expansion of Russia's armed forces on its western frontier. This threatens not only Ukraine, but NATO members Latvia, Lithuania, and Poland as well. Russia is modernizing its military infrastructure and expanding its force structure in Kaliningrad. The Kremlin is also leveraging Alyaksandr Lukashenka's isolation and vulnerability in Belarus in order to achieve Moscow's longtime goal of expanding Russia's military footprint in that country. Russia and Belarus recently wrapped up back-to-back exercises that lasted for most of March and have scheduled a record number of exercises this year, culminating with the massive Zapad 2021 in September. The exercises provide Moscow with the opportunity to constantly rotate forces into Belarus, thereby establishing a de facto permanent military presence there. Moscow and Minsk have also announced plans to build a joint military training center in western Belarus. The United States and its NATO allies therefore need to look at the build-up near the Ukrainian border in the broader context of Russia's expanded military capacity and activity and take steps to assure the security of the alliance and its partners. Brian Boner, chief editor, Kyiv Post. The current military build-up close to the Ukrainian border should remind everyone of two unhappy realities 7 years after Russia first launched its war against Ukraine. Firstly, Russian military superiority means they can do what they want against Ukraine, which has improved its military but still has a long way to go to improve its defense capabilities. Secondly, the West still doesn't treat Vladimir Putin as the rogue dictator that he is, guilty of countless war crimes and deserving of the most crushing sanctions and isolation that the democratic world can dish out. Taras Kuzio, professor, National University of Kyiv Mahila Academy. Russia is unlikely to launch a full-scale invasion of Ukraine because this would lead to a long war and the complete breakdown of Russia's relations with the West. Vladimir Putin is more likely to be aiming for a repeat of the trap he laid for Georgian President Mikheil Saakashvili in 2008 when provocations from South Ossetia led to Georgia's intervention in the separatist region. This gave Russia the excuse to militarily intervene in defense of its citizens and humiliate Saakashvili. Russia would love to provoke Ukraine in the same manner. Much as it did previously in Georgia, the Kremlin has distributed hundreds of thousands of Russian passports to Ukrainians living in occupied eastern Ukraine. Ominously, in recent weeks the Kremlin-controlled Russian media has begun loudly accusing Ukraine of plotting an offensive. However, there are a number of major differences between Georgia and Ukraine which raise doubts over the effectiveness of the Kremlin's tactics. Saakashvili was eventually followed in Georgia by the more Russia-friendly Bidzina Ivanishvili. In Ukraine, there is no pro-Russian leader waiting in the wings who could conceivably win a parliamentary or presidential majority. Ukraine is also many times larger and more populous than Georgia. A conventional Russian invasion and occupation would require half of Russia's entire armed forces and would face serious resistance, both from the Ukrainian military and from partisan-style operations. Russia would no longer be able to deny waging war against Ukraine and would become bogged down in a major conflict on its own doorstep. The cost in terms of lives, money, and international isolation would be disastrous.